Here is a number the Watchtower organization does not want you to think about. According to the Pew Research Center, in one of the largest religious surveys ever conducted in the United States, Jehovah's Witnesses have the lowest retention rate of any religion in America, 66%. 2 out of every 3 people raised as Jehovah's Witnesses walk away before adulthood is over. No other major religion loses its own children at that rate. Not Catholics, not evangelicals, not Mormons. Jehovah's Witnesses stand alone at the bottom, and the generation walking away fastest is Gen Z. In 1997, the organization baptized nearly 376,000 people, the highest number in its history. By 2022, that number had collapsed to 145,000. It has since recovered to around 300,000, but analysis of Watchtower's own data shows that up to half of those baptisms are now children of existing witnesses, not new converts. And in 2025, 45% of global baptisms came from just 5 African countries, where literacy rates fall well below the global average. In developed nations, the United States, Australia, Western Europe, the organization is not growing. It is aging out. Australian census data shows a dramatic decline in young witnesses, with growth only in age groups over 45. The chairs are emptying, and the people leaving are not weak Bible studies who lost interest. They are the children who were raised inside the system from birth. So what changed? 1. The internet destroyed the information monopoly. For most of its history, the Watchtower controlled every answer to every question. Books, magazines, meetings, everything came from one source. Outside research was not just discouraged, it was labeled spiritually dangerous. The phrase, independent thinking, was a warning, not a compliment. Then Gen Z arrived with smartphones. When a young witness searches the history of 1914, they do not find just the current explanation on jw.org. They find the original predictions. They find the failed dates, 1914, 1925, 1975. They find Frederick Franz on a convention stage telling thousands that the Great Tribulation could begin before the year was out. They find the 1969 Awake article discouraging young people from pursuing higher education because the end was so near. And they see that those obedient young people are now elderly, many with no retirement savings and no career to show for their loyalty. Previous generations discovered contradictions and blamed themselves. Gen Z discovers contradictions and opens another tab. They cross-reference, they verify, not because they want to leave, but because that is how their generation processes information, and when the facts do not check out, trust does not bend, it breaks. 2. Fear and shunning lost their power. For decades, 2 forces kept people inside the organization: fear of Armageddon and fear of losing everyone they loved. Fear of a God who would destroy billions for missing meetings. Fear of disfellowshipping, knowing that if you left, your own mother might never speak to you again. These were not side effects of the doctrine. They were the doctrine, the invisible fence that kept generations smiling through exhaustion. But Gen Z has language for this now. They know what coercive control looks like. They can identify emotional manipulation. And when they sit in a kingdom hall hearing the same Armageddon urgency that was preached in 1914, over 100 years ago, they do not feel motivated. They feel deceived. And shunning? The policy was so extreme that in 2022, Norway deregistered Jehovah's Witnesses entirely, the first religious group to lose national recognition in the country, specifically because the government concluded that shunning, particularly of baptized minors, constituted psychological violence. The organization lost funding it had received for 30 years. And just days after the Oslo District Court upheld that decision in March 2024, the governing body quietly softened its shunning policy, allowing members to offer simple greetings to disfellowshipped people. A practice they had enforced for decades was adjusted the moment a European court called it harmful. Gen Z noticed. They always notice. They do not see shunning as discipline. They see it as a system that punishes honesty and rewards pretending. And many of them watched it destroy their own families. Watched a sibling get disfellowshipped. Watched their parents sob at the dinner table, not because the sibling had done something terrible, but because the organization told them they could no longer speak to their own child. And instead of learning the intended lesson, obey or lose everything, they learned something the governing body never planned. They learned the system was cruel. 3. They refused to sacrifice themselves for an image. Gen Z talks about things previous generations were told to bury. anxiety, depression, burnout, the constant pressure to perform, more meetings, more service hours, more personal study, more pioneer goals, and the guilt for never being enough. For decades, mental health was dismissed inside the organization. Anxious? Pray harder. Depressed? Go out in service. Elders were not therapists. They were men with a Bible and the Shepherd the Flock of God manual, and that manual had chapters on judicial procedures, not on clinical depression. Pew Research confirms the downstream cost. Jehovah's Witnesses in the United States have among the lowest education levels and lowest household incomes of any major religious group. Only 3% hold a postgraduate degree. 42% earn less than $30,000 a year. The organization spent decades warning young people away from university. Gen Z is watching those consequences play out in their parents' lives. The financial stress, the missed careers, the quiet desperation. And beyond mental health, they want something previous generations were never allowed to have: their own identity. Inside the organization, identity is not discovered. It is assigned. What to believe, how to dress, who to love, what career to pursue. Gen Z does not accept that trade. When their true self does not fit the mold, they do not pretend. They leave. Previous generations called them PMOs, physically in, mentally out, an entire underground population performing belief they no longer held, trapped by love for family. Gen Z refuses to join that underground. They would rather be honest on the outside than broken on the inside. Somewhere right now, there is a witness mother sitting in a kingdom hall, saving a seat that will remain empty. She raised her son in the truth. She dreamed of the day he would apply to Bethel. She pictured herself at a special assembly, watching him receive an assignment, tears running down her face, not from sadness, but from the deepest pride a witness parent can feel. Every family study night, every Saturday morning in service, every sacrifice, it was all for that moment. But her son is not coming. He stopped coming months ago, not because he hates her, but because he could no longer pretend. She thinks the world took him. She thinks if she prays hard enough, he will come back. He is not coming back, not because he is lost, but because for the first time in his life, he is finding himself. The governing body can redesign jw.org. They can soften the shunning language and lower the pioneer hours. But the young people are watching, and they have something no previous generation had: access to the full story. And once you have read the full story, you cannot go back to the approved version. This is not a rebellion, it is an awakening, and awakenings do not reverse.